The year I learned how to say no without apologizing was the year everyone decided I had lost my mind. I was 21, the only daughter of a family whose name sat on shipping containers and scholarship plaques like a watermark, and I had been promised since childhood to the boy next door, a boy who grew into a man with the kind of calm that made people call him reliable, when they really meant easy to plan around. Our families treated us like a merger that happened to smile. When reporters asked, my mother would laugh and say we were destined, as if destiny came with a catering invoice. I believed it, too. For a long time, it is comforting to be told your life is already written. You can stop wondering whether your handwriting is ugly. Then, on the first Monday of my senior year, a new student walked into our lecture hall wearing thrifted shoes and a quiet stubbornness that did not ask permission. Her name was Rowan Dela Cruz, and she had arrived on a scholarship funded by my father's foundation. My friends leaned toward me as if gossip was a shared blanket. "Careful," one whispered. "Those scholarship kids cling. They'll follow your fiancé like it's an elevator out of poverty." Another giggled. "If Cassian gets stuck to her, that's super glue. You'll be fine, Elise. No one drops you for someone like that." I said nothing. Not because I agreed, but because I had been trained to conserve my voice. I looked at Cassian Leung, future CEO by inheritance, present-day straight-A student by habit, and waited for him to look back. He did, briefly, with his usual gentle precision, then returned to his notes. In that flicker, I felt the first hairline crack in the story everyone loved. I realized I had been watching him for years and calling it security, while he had been watching the schedule. Rowan sat in the back row and took notes the way someone holds onto a cliff edge. Tight, deliberate, unwilling to slip. She did not speak much, but she did not try to disappear either. 2 days later, the campus cafe began receiving a daily order placed under Cassian's name. Black coffee, no sugar, and a pastry from a small bakery across town that did not deliver. The baristas thought it was romantic. Cassian looked at the first bag as if it were a live insect. "I didn't order this," he said, and slid it toward his study partner. "Eat it. Don't waste food." The next day, the bag returned. The next day after that, too. Eventually, he stopped reacting, as if ignoring the gesture could dissolve it. Our classmates turned it into entertainment. Half said Rowan was simply grateful. The other half said her eyes followed Cassian the way a lens follows light, greedy and unblinking. Somebody compared us to a fairy tale with a wicked princess and a poor, pure heroine, and the room laughed because it was easier than admitting that real people don't stay in their assigned roles. I didn't hate Rowan. What I hated was how quickly everyone built a stage around her, and how easily I stayed standing in my corner of it. One afternoon, after a seminar, she caught up to me by the library doors. Her voice was soft but steady. "Elise," she said, like she'd practiced the syllables. "They're not wrong about me." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my expression calm the way my mother taught me for charity galas. "About what?" Rowan's gaze did not drop. "I didn't come here just for classes," she said. "I came here because of Cassian." The honesty hit harder than an insult. I should have felt threatened. Instead, I felt tired, as if I'd been handed a problem I didn't sign up to solve. "That's brave," I said. "Or foolish." Rowan's mouth twitched. "Both," she admitted. "But it's not pure. I'm not pretending." I nodded once. "Good," I said. "Pretending is expensive." She looked surprised, as if she expected me to slap her with etiquette. "Are you going to tell him?" she asked. "No," I replied. "This is between you and your choices. If you want to embarrass yourself, I don't need to help." She flinched. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "You're kinder than they said," she murmured. I didn't correct her. I wasn't kind. I was simply unfamiliar with the sensation of competing for something I never fully chose. The semester Rowan stopped leaving pastries was the semester the campus found a new way to make her a spectacle. It started with a group chat screenshot, the kind that spreads faster than facts. Someone claimed Rowan had entered the annual Bridge Grant competition, an internal contest for students proposing community projects, and in her application video, she had described an unnamed donor's son as the person who pulled my life out of a flood. The video didn't show Cassian's face, didn't say his name, but it showed the library corridor where he studied, the cafe where he bought tea, the scholarship letter with the foundation seal. My father insisted on embossing like a signature. People aren't stupid. They just enjoy pretending they are when it gives them permission to be cruel. The video went viral inside our campus like it was entertainment. Comments arrived in tidy categories. The sentimental ones calling it inspiring, the cynical ones calling it manipulation, and the vicious ones calling Rowan a climber who knew exactly which ladder to choose. One comment tagged me directly. "So what does Elise think about the scholarship girl branding her fiancé as her savior?" Another said, "If you're born rich, you can be generous and still stay on top. Must be nice." I watched the video late at night, alone in my room, and felt a strange mix of embarrassment and empathy. Rowan's narration was earnest, but the way she framed Cassian as a rescue rope made my skin crawl. Not because it stole him from me, but because it turned her into a passenger in her own story. I had been a passenger too, just in a more expensive seat. The next morning, the dean called Cassian and me into his office because the school loved a quiet scandal it could manage. Rowan sat across from us with her hands folded, posture perfect as if she had learned discipline by necessity. "Do you understand why this is problematic?" the dean asked, voice warm with administrative disappointment. Rowan's eyes flicked to Cassian, then to me. "I understand that people will interpret it however they want," she said, "but it's my story." Cassian spoke before I could. "It's not her story to attach to me," he said, and the bluntness startled even him. Rowan flinched, then steadied. "I didn't attach you," she replied. "I described what happened." Cassian's jaw tightened. "You described a version that makes you helpless and makes me a hero," he said. "That's not what I did. I signed paperwork." "You did the work." The room went still. Cassian rarely spoke like that. His calm was usually an umbrella. Today, he let rain fall. Rowan's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "Then why did you hire me?" she asked quietly. Cassian's gaze moved to the window, as if looking at the city could help him find the right sentence. "Because you were qualified," he said at last, "and because you deserved a chance that wasn't tied to anyone's pity." Rowan's throat worked. "And Elise?" she asked, turning to me. The dean looked relieved that the conflict was becoming personal instead of institutional. I met Rowan's eyes. "I think your project is good," I said. "I also think you don't need to paint anyone as your lifeline to prove you're worth supporting." Rowan's lips pressed together. "Easy for you to say," she murmured. "You were born with support." The truth of that made me wince. "Yes," I answered, "and that's why I'm telling you. If you keep using other people as proof of your value, you'll always be at their mercy." Rowan's gaze held mine for a long beat, then she nodded once. "Slow. Noted," she said, voice clipped. The dean cleared his throat and suggested a public statement to reduce misunderstanding. Cassian refused. "Statements don't change people," he said. "They just give them new words to weaponize." We left the office in silence. In the hallway, Rowan walked away without looking back. For the first time, I didn't feel like we were rivals. I felt like we were two different kinds of trapped, and the building itself was the cage. That week, someone leaked a photo of Rowan's notebook online, pages filled with sketches and operational checklists. And yes, Cassian's name written in the margins like a habit she couldn't quit. The internet did what it always does. It turned private longing into public sport. Students laughed in the cafeteria. Influencers on campus made how to manifest a billionaire jokes. A boy in our marketing class said loudly, "If you can't have the man, at least get the internship." I watched Rowan walk through the courtyard with her head high, absorbing the stares like hail. Something in me snapped, not because I loved Rowan, but because I recognized the mechanism. Humiliation is society's cheapest form of control. It trains people to stay in their place by making examples of those who reach. Cassian walked up to the boy and said, very calmly, "If you ever talk about her like that again, I'll make sure you don't get hired anywhere that matters." It wasn't noble. It was power used bluntly. The boy went pale and mumbled an apology he didn't mean. Rowan, hearing this, turned and looked at Cassian with a face full of conflict. "I don't need you to threaten people for me," she said. Cassian's expression hardened. "I'm not doing it for you," he replied. "I'm doing it because I'm tired of watching people treat cruelty like a hobby." Rowan's eyes flicked to me. For a heartbeat, I expected her to say something sharp. Instead, she said, "Then threaten the whole campus, Mr. Leung. They'll still find another target." She walked away. Cassian exhaled, frustration flaring. "She wants to be hurt," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "She's used to being hurt. That's different." Cassian looked at me, and in his gaze I saw a question he didn't know how to ask. "What are you used to?" I didn't have an answer then. All I had was the uneasy awareness that my comfort had come at the cost of other people's invisibility, and that even when I tried to be kind, my kindness carried the weight of hierarchy. That was the real reason Rowan's honesty unsettled me, not because she threatened my relationship, but because she threatened my illusion that power could be gentle without being complicit. The first time I saw Cassian do something for Rowan, it was small enough that anyone could mistake it for nothing. It happened in an empty classroom at lunch. I had returned to grab a folder and found Rowan hunched over a desk, one arm wrapped around her stomach, face pale. Cassian entered behind me carrying 2 cups of hot milk tea. I assumed one was for me, because my sweet tooth was a well-documented family weakness. Cassian set 1 cup on my desk, then walked to Rowan's table and placed the other cup beside her without ceremony. "Stop waking up early to buy coffee you can't afford," he said, tone clipped. "Eat something. You're going to make people say I'm letting you starve for my ego." Rowan looked up, eyes wet with that startled animal gratitude that makes bystanders feel heroic. Cassian did not soften. "Don't misunderstand," he added, like he was sealing a contract. "I'm not interested. I'm being practical." Rowan's gaze dimmed, but she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, voice careful as a bandage. Cassian returned to my desk and sat as if the entire scene had been a maintenance check. "Weekend plans?" he asked me, lightness tucked over his bluntness like a napkin over a knife. I stared at him for a beat too long. He was so certain that careful boundaries could prevent mess. I wanted to believe him. I chose a comedy show, because laughter felt like an argument against tension. He smiled, and I told myself the warmth in my chest was love and not relief. Weeks passed. Rowan's daily offerings continued until Cassian, finally irritated, took her outside after class. No one knew what he said, but she returned with red eyes and never left food for him again. The campus moved on, bored by a story that refused to climax. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Endings do not happen when you decide they should. They happen when the plot finds a sharper appetite. Graduation approached like a train on a track nobody questioned. Our families began discussing the next stage, the way they discussed quarterly goals. At dinner, Cassian's mother laughed and mapped out my future with the ease of someone choosing a menu. Engagement party after my internship. Wedding within a year. First child a year after that. 3 children total to balance our surnames like a legal equation. My mother nodded eagerly and suggested meeting a decorator. I sat there holding a can of fruit soda, watching them arrange my adulthood like floral centerpieces. My throat cinched. I slipped out to the garden and sat on the swing beneath lantern lights. The sky faded from apricot to bruised purple, and I felt a fear I couldn't name. Cassian found me, as he always did, moving quietly, carrying a blanket as if my discomfort were weather. He sat beside me without pushing. "What's wrong?" he asked. I stared at the darkening leaves. "I'm scared," I admitted, voice thin. "I was Elise Tran for 21 years, and suddenly I'm going to be Mrs. Leung. Then I'm going to be someone's mother. They've scheduled my existence. Where am I in that schedule?" Cassian listened the way he listened to business cases. Fully, patiently, as if my feelings were data worth respecting. "We don't have to do anything on their timeline," he said. "Not marriage, not children. If you want to study abroad, do it. If you want to work, work. If you want to disappear for a while and figure out what you want, I'll back you." He took my hands, warm and steady. "I want you to have a life that is yours, Elise," he said. That sentence, spoken without drama, was the first gift he ever gave me that wasn't also a tradition. I believed him. I also realized, quietly, that I didn't know what I wanted. My entire personality had been an excellent response to other people's expectations. The thought made me dizzy. So I did the first unplanned thing of my life. I applied to a volunteer program on a coastal island in the Philippines, helping rebuild schools after typhoons. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't strategic. It felt like breathing. My parents called it a phase. Cassian called it your choice, and sent supplies without complaint. When I told him I'd be gone for months, he only said, "Go, I'll be here." I thought loyalty was a bridge. I didn't realize distance can turn bridges into tightropes. When I returned from the island the first time, sunburned and changed, my family treated my enthusiasm like a temporary illness. My father hosted a dinner to welcome me back, which was really a strategic intervention, wrapped in seafood and polite smiles. He invited 2 board members from the foundation, a senator's spouse, and a public relations consultant who kept referring to my work as a compelling personal brand. They praised my bravery, then suggested ways to make it photogenic. "We can film you handing out backpacks," the consultant said. "A short documentary. Donors love a transformation arc." I stared at my plate and felt my appetite evaporate. "The point is not my arc," I said. "The point is the school." My father's expression stayed pleasant, but his eyes tightened. "Elise," he said quietly, "we're proud, but we also need to manage risk. You were in a disaster zone. You could have been kidnapped. People will ask why our daughter is running around in places that make headlines." My mother added, "Too sweet." "And your wedding timeline?" Cassian's hand rested on my knee under the table, a steady anchor. I took a slow breath. "I'm not postponing my life," I said. "I'm choosing it." The senator's spouse laughed as if I'd made a joke. "Sweetheart," she said, "your life is already chosen. That's why people envy you." The words should have flattered me. They made me furious. "They envy the cage," I replied before I could stop myself. Silence snapped across the table. My mother's face flashed with controlled shock. My father set his fork down. "Watch your tone," he said, the first crack in his hospitality mask. Cassian squeezed my knee gently, not as a warning, but as support. I stood. "I'm going to start a fund," I announced. "Not a photo opportunity. A fund with local leadership, audited publicly. If you want to support it, great. If you want to own it, no." The consultant opened her mouth, then closed it. My father's jaw clenched. "You can't do that without our network," he said. "You'll burn out." "Maybe," I answered, "but I'd rather burn trying than polish my life into something that looks safe and feels empty." I walked out before dessert, heart racing, and didn't apologize to the door when it swung too hard. In the car, Cassian was quiet. "Was that planned?" he asked. I laughed once, shaky. "Nothing about me has been planned lately," I said. Cassian looked at me with something like awe and fear braided together. "I meant what I said on the swing," he murmured. "I'll back you." I stared out the window at the city lights. "Then you'll have to back me when your parents hate me," I said. Cassian's mouth quirked. "They already think you're dangerous," he replied. "Now you're just proving them right." Launching the fund was like trying to build a boat while already at sea. I learned more about money in those months than any finance class ever taught me. How quickly generosity turns into control. How often the same people who donate to help also demand to be admired for it. How many contracts are written to keep the giver safe rather than keep the receiver empowered. I spent nights drafting governance rules and mornings meeting community leaders on unstable video calls, listening as they explained what they needed and what they did not. I learned to translate "we appreciate your concern" into "please stop interfering." Rowan, despite our awkward history, sent me a message one night, a spreadsheet template for transparent procurement, color-coded and painfully thorough. She wrote only, "Use it if you want, no strings." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "Thank you." It was the simplest message I'd sent in years that wasn't curated. When the fund held its first public briefing, my father attended with 2 lawyers and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Reporters asked predictable questions about my personal journey. I redirected them to the local coordinators, to the teachers, to the procurement process. One reporter pushed, "Is this about proving yourself outside your engagement?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Cassian, standing beside me with crutches, spoke calmly into the microphone. "It's about kids having roofs," he said, "not about our relationship." The room laughed nervously, then fell quiet, because blunt truth is embarrassing in public. After the briefing, my father pulled me aside. "You're making me look like the villain," he hissed. I met his gaze. "If you don't like how it looks," I said, "change what you're doing, not what I'm saying." He stared at me as if seeing a stranger wearing his daughter's face. For a moment, I felt grief for the obedient girl I used to be. Then I felt relief. Strangers can negotiate. Obedient daughters just comply. The island was not romantic. It was salt and heat, and the constant rasp of sand in your shoes. The school we rebuilt had walls patched with corrugated metal and optimism. Children ran barefoot in the dust, laughing as if laughter were the only currency they never ran out of. At night, when generators coughed into silence, the sky turned into a bowl of stars so bright it made cities seem like a bad habit. I was supposed to help with logistics, but I kept getting pulled into the classroom, teaching English with a whiteboard marker that leaked. The work stripped my identity down to essentials. I was not my family name, not my engagement ring, not the girl who smiled politely at donors. I was a person carrying boxes, translating needs, listening to teachers who had lost homes and still showed up for kids. On video calls, Cassian watched me with a softness I rarely saw on campus. "You look happy," he said one night, voice low. I nodded. "I feel awake," I answered. My mother called soon after with a warning disguised as concern. "Long distance is dangerous," she said. "Cassian has opportunities. People will circle him. You can't leave a man alone too long." I wanted to argue, but the insecurity she planted found easy soil in me, because my relationship had always been built on familiarity, not discovery. Then, during a week when storms had damaged the phone lines, Cassian's messages slowed. I told myself he was busy. I told myself not to be dramatic. On the day I received a certificate of appreciation from the local council, I sent him a photo, grinning, hair frizzed by humidity. No reply. 1 day passed, then 2. On the 3rd night, my father called. His voice was careful, like he was carrying glass. "Elise," he said, "Cassian had an accident." The words punched the air out of me. "A car accident," he added quickly. "He's alive, broken leg, bruises. Your mother didn't want to distract you." I didn't hear most of it. I booked the earliest flight with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. On the plane, every noise sounded too loud. I pictured Cassian's face under hospital lights. The calm finally cracked. I realized, with an ache that felt humiliating, that my choice had consequences that reached beyond me. When I landed, jet-lagged and raw, I expected to see Cassian's driver. Instead, someone held a sign with my name in neat handwriting. Rowan Delacruz stood beneath the airport fluorescence with a suitcase trolley and a smile that belonged in a corporate lobby. She looked different. Hairstyled, makeup subtle, posture composed. For a heartbeat, I didn't recognize her. Then she said, "Elise, over here." And the past snapped into place like a file folder closing. In the car, Rowan spoke as if we were colleagues. "Don't worry," she said. "Cassian can walk with crutches now. He's stubborn." I stared at her hands on the steering wheel, manicured, steady. "Why are you here?" I asked, voice too sharp. Rowan glanced at me in the mirror. "Because I work for him," she said. "Executive assistant." The words tasted wrong. Rowan, the girl in thrifted shoes, now driving my family's fiancé to a private hospital. "How long?" I asked. 18 months, she replied. I applied when I saw an opening. He didn't recognize me at first. I had to remind him. A small laugh escaped her, almost fond. His face was memorable. I watched her. An unease crawled up my spine. Her cadence, her careful smile, the way she paused before certain words, it felt familiar in a way that was impossible. Then I understood. She had learned it from me. Not my face, but my manner. My mother's brand of calm. My family's brand of polish. Rowan had copied my armor and made it fit her. In a twisted way, it was impressive. In another, it felt like looking at a reflection that had decided it deserved the original's life. At the hospital, the corridors were white and quiet. When I entered Cassian's room, he was propped against pillows with a laptop on his knees, on a call. He looked thinner, bruised at the cheekbone, but when he saw me, his eyes lit the way windows light when someone opens curtains. He ended the call abruptly, ignoring whoever was mid-sentence. "Elise," he breathed. My throat tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed and took his hand, careful not to bump the cast. The familiar steadiness of his grip felt like home and accusation at once. Rowan entered behind me carrying a small tray. She adjusted the bed angle, checked the water, placed pills beside Cassian with practiced intimacy. "Time for medication," she said. Cassian took them without looking at her, like a habit. Then he turned to her, voice cool. "You can go," he said. Rowan's smile didn't falter. "Of course," she replied, and left with the same quiet efficiency I used to pride myself on. The door clicked shut. Cassian exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath. "I didn't want you to see that," he said. "See what?" I asked. "That I needed help," he admitted. I swallowed. "Everyone needs help," I said, and realized how new it felt to say that out loud. I stayed until the sky outside turned gold. Somewhere between the beeping machines and Cassian's tired jokes, I made a decision. I'm coming home, I told him. He blinked. Because of me? He asked, wary. I squeezed his hand. Not to abandon what I love, I said, to build it differently. The island taught me I don't have to live in one place to support a cause. I can raise funds, build partnerships, train local leaders, keep the work going without disappearing from my own life. His eyes reddened. I wanted you to have a life that was yours, he whispered. I still do, I said, but my life includes you, and I'm finally choosing that, not being scheduled into it. He laughed, shaky, and I thought that was the turning point. I didn't yet know the story had another knot waiting to tighten. The next day, Rowan asked to have dinner with me. Consider it repayment, she said, for a dinner you gave me years ago without meaning to. Curiosity beat pride, and I agreed. We met at a small steakhouse that smelled like butter and money. Rowan navigated the menu with ease, cutting her food silently. No clinking, no hesitation. She was too comfortable, and that comfort felt like a message. When the plates were half empty, she spoke. In high school, she said, I was a poor kid watching you like you were a map to a better country. Her tone was calm, but her fingers tightened around her glass. I hated you, she admitted, because you were kind without needing anything from me. Your kindness made me feel small. I told myself you were patronizing, even when you weren't. I didn't interrupt. Rowan's honesty had a bitter edge that made it difficult to sentimentalize. I copied you, she continued. Your posture, your diction, your smile. I practiced in bathroom mirrors until I could pass as someone who belonged. I thought if I looked like you, he might look at me. She laughed softly, the sound thin. And when you left for the islands, people said you were crazy. Part of me thought, good, this is my chance. I took the job. I stayed near him. I learned everything. I waited. Her eyes lifted to mine. Do you know how Cassian treats me? She asked. Like air, she answered for herself. Not cruelly, worse, indifferently. I could stand beside him every day, and he would still only see the woman who isn't there. The confession landed heavier than jealousy. Then why keep doing it? I asked. Rowan's mouth curved in something like defiance. Because I needed to understand, she said. How you could walk away from everything I would have traded my life for. How you could trust him so completely. How you could choose something as impractical as storm-ravaged classrooms over the smoothest future. She exhaled. He worked himself sick trying to compress his schedule so he could visit you. That's how the accident happened. He drove when he shouldn't have. He was rushing to earn time with you. The revelation hit me like cold water. My chest tightened. Rowan stared at her plate, voice quieter. If you ever go back, she said, take me. I want to see the place that beat me, not because I want him anymore. She paused. Because I want to stop wanting to be you. I watched her face. For the first time, her expression didn't mimic mine. It was raw and human and tired. It made me more sympathetic than I wanted to be. You don't need my permission to stop copying me, I said. But you can come, I added, surprising myself. If you're serious. If you want to see the work, not the romance. Rowan's eyes widened. Then she smiled. And it was almost the same smile as years ago in the library corridor. Thin but honest. I'm serious, she said. And I don't want a fairy tale. I want a life. I nodded. Then come, I said. Fairy tales are for people who can afford to be saved. We're going to do real work. 2 months later, once Cassian's recovery was stable, and he insisted he could survive a week without me hovering like an anxious satellite, I returned to the island for a short handover trip. Rowan came with me, not as a romantic rival, but as an assistant tasked with donor communication and supply tracking. On paper, it made sense. In my chest, it felt like tempting fate. The island welcomed us with thick heat and the smell of rain. Rowan was quiet at first, eyes scanning everything as if searching for the hidden camera that would reveal the trick. She watched the children run to me, yelling my name with the bright certainty of belonging, and something in her face softened, then hardened again, like she couldn't decide whether to grieve or envy. We spent 2 days in meetings, finalizing budgets, training local coordinators, and stocking a clinic with antibiotics and mosquito nets. On the 3rd day, we traveled inland to a remote barangay near a former conflict zone, where aid convoys were sometimes targeted. The local security officer insisted it was safe today, a word that carries too much faith. The sun was honey-colored when we arrived. The wind carried distant laughter, and, beneath it, the faint metallic echo of old fear. I was reviewing distribution points when a shout split the air. Men emerged from the tree line with cloth covering their faces and guns that looked handmade but deadly enough. Panic scattered through the crowd. My body froze for half a heartbeat, brain trying to negotiate reality. Then Rowan slammed into me. She shoved me to the ground hard enough to knock breath out of my lungs. A shot cracked. Something hissed past my cheek like a hot insect. I tasted dirt. Rowan's weight covered me, shielding instinctively, not elegantly. Another shot. Then chaos. Villagers screaming, staff diving behind crates, the security officer shouting into a radio. I felt Rowan tremble. "Get off!" I tried to say, but my voice was swallowed by noise. The gunman grabbed a box of medicine, then fled when distant sirens approached. When it was over, the air smelled like smoke and fear sweat. I pushed up and saw Rowan clutching her side, face clenched. Blood seeped through her shirt in a dark bloom. The bullet had grazed her, shallow but real. "Rowan," I whispered, hands shaking as I pressed gauze against the wound. "Stay with me." She looked at me, eyes glassy, and then she laughed weakly. "I did it," she breathed. "I actually did something without calculating how it made me look." "Stop talking," I said, swallowing panic. "Breathe." Her mouth moved anyway. "Elise," she whispered, "I wanted to steal him from you. I wanted to win." Her lips trembled. "But right now, I don't care. I'm just tired of being hungry for someone else's life." I fought tears, angry at them for choosing this moment. "You're not dying," I snapped. "Don't turn this into poetry." Rowan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Fine," she murmured. "No poetry." She squeezed my wrist. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise you won't make this a story about me redeeming myself. Promise you'll let it be messy and real." I nodded fiercely. "I promise," I said. "Now shut up and let the medic do her job." In the field hospital later, under flickering lights, Rowan lay with an IV in her arm and the stubborn look of someone annoyed at her own vulnerability. She stared at the drip bag like it was teaching her a lesson she didn't ask for. I sat beside her in silence until she spoke. "Can we pretend today didn't happen?" she asked, voice dry. I snorted. "Absolutely not," I said. "You saved my life. I'm going to be unbearably grateful." Rowan rolled her eyes, but her shoulders loosened. "You really are annoying," she muttered. "You're welcome," I replied. She turned her head toward the window where palm leaves moved like slow applause. "I don't want to be your copy anymore," she said quietly. "I want to be Rowan." I nodded, my throat tight. "Then be Rowan," I said. "It's harder, but it's yours." Cassian arrived 2 days later on the first flight he could bully his doctor into approving. He walked with a cane and a furious limp, face pale from pain and fear. When he saw me, he held himself together for one heartbeat, then collapsed into me, arms crushing, breath shaking. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "Don't go back." He just held me like he had almost lost the right to. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, voice breaking at the edges. "I'm fine," I said, touching his cheek. "Rowan got grazed," I added. His gaze shifted to Rowan's bed, where she sat upright with her IV like a stubborn flag. Cassian nodded at her once, a gesture that held both respect and distance. Rowan met his eyes and did not try to make them soften. Later, while Cassian slept in a chair, exhausted, Rowan and I sat in the corridor on plastic seats. She stared at her bandaged side. "He loves you," she said flatly, without bitterness. "I know," I whispered. And for the first time, I felt the word like a decision rather than a decoration. On the flight home, my mind kept replaying the gunshot, the shove, the blood, the way Rowan's body had moved before her pride could stop it. I realized that the same person who once clung to a fantasy had just risked her life to protect someone she resented. That wasn't a romance plot. That was a human plot, messy and inconvenient. Back in the city, my parents tried to lock me into safety with money. They offered me a position in the foundation, a carefully curated role that would keep my compassion visible but controlled. Cassian's family offered a faster wedding, as if marriage could act as a seatbelt. I looked at their spreadsheets of my future, and felt the familiar fear, but this time it came with a new muscle: refusal. I established the Storm School Network, a program run by local leaders with transparent budgets and community oversight. I moved the fundraising base to the city so I could be with Cassian while still supporting the island, not by saving it, but by strengthening it. Rowan resigned from Cassian's office and joined the network as operations director. She stopped copying my voice. Sometimes she spoke too sharply. Sometimes she laughed too loudly. Sometimes she wore colors I would never choose. It was glorious. The first time she introduced herself to a donor panel without mentioning me, my chest warmed with something I had not expected: pride that wasn't possessive. Cassian, still healing, began attending meetings, listening to teachers talk about broken roofs and unbroken will. He didn't try to fix everything. He just showed up, which, for a man raised to think love is a promise on paper, was his own kind of rebellion. One evening, as we walked home from a community briefing, Cassian asked quietly, "Do you still want to marry me?" The question was gentle, but terrifying, because it was real. I stopped under a streetlight and looked at him. "Yes," I said, "but not because it's the plan, because I want to." His shoulders sagged with relief, and I realized how long he'd been carrying the fear that my freedom would leave no space for him. "Then we'll do it our way," he said. "No schedules," I agreed. "No 3-child spreadsheets." He smiled, the first unguarded smile I'd seen since the accident. "Deal," he said, and we shook on it like two people finally negotiating their own lives. Months later, a journalist wrote a feature about our program. She wanted a neat narrative: the privileged girl saved by purpose, the poor girl redeemed by sacrifice, the faithful fiancé waiting like a lighthouse. I read the draft and felt my skin prickle. Neat narratives are how society sells comfort and hides complexity. I called the journalist and said, "If you want to publish this, you remove the parts where you make Rowan a villain turned saint. She's just a person. And you remove the parts where you make me a fearless heroine." I was terrified. We were all terrified. The only difference is we kept moving. The journalist hesitated, then agreed. Maybe because I had learned to use my family name as leverage for something other than ego. The article went live with a different headline: 3 people refuse their assigned roles. I liked that. It left room for mess. It left room for growth. It left room for the part of the story that mattered most. Not who won a boy, but who stopped living like a prize was the point. In the weeks after the inland incident, my dreams were full of sharp noises. I would jolt awake hearing phantom gunfire, then lie still while Cassian slept beside me, one hand unconsciously reaching for mine. Trauma is rude. It arrives without asking whether you have time. I started going to a counselor recommended by one of the island teachers, a woman who had survived 3 storms and spoke about fear like it was weather you could learn to navigate. She taught me to name what I felt instead of packaging it as composure. Cassian came with me once, sat quietly, and admitted he had been terrified not only of losing me, but of resenting my freedom. Rowan, when I told her I was seeing someone, didn't mock me. She just nodded and said, "Good. I'm tired of pretending pain is a personality." She began mentoring a group of scholarship students at our university, not as a hero, but as a brutally honest older sister. I overheard her telling a freshman, "Don't romanticize the people who help you. They're not gods, and you're not a beggar. You're just under-resourced." The freshman blinked, startled. Rowan shrugged. "Say thank you," she added, "and then build your own tools." Listening to her, I realized she had finally stopped measuring herself against me. She was building something I couldn't copy even if I tried. Her own voice. On the morning of my engagement, there were no cameras. We signed paperwork at a small civil office, ate noodles at a street stall, and then went to the harbor to watch cargo ships move like slow animals across the water. My mother complained about the lack of flowers, but she also cried, and I realized she wasn't mourning tradition as much as she was mourning her inability to control the outcome. Rowan arrived late, limping slightly, and tossed me a small box. Inside was a simple bracelet, made from braided cord and a tiny charm shaped like a roof. "It's not expensive," she said quickly, as if expense were an automatic accusation. "It's from the kids' art workshop. They wanted you to have it." I slipped it on and felt the rough cord against my skin like a reminder. Cassian thanked Rowan with a nod and a rare smile, and Rowan didn't flinch. She had stopped seeking his approval. In the